This is K.M. Weiland, and you are listening to the Helping Writers Become Authors podcast. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode, Archetypal Antagonists for the Hero Arc, Dragon and Sick King. The well-known hero arc offers us the exciting story of a brave youth fighting to discover and earn his own worthiness. It follows on the heels of the maiden arc's initial individuation from the authority figures that dominate one's youth, and it offers the young adult the opportunity to discover what he is meant to do with his life. Viewed mythically, the hero arc or journey is usually an epic quest in which the hero ventures away from the kingdom to confront a dragon and find the elixir that will heal the sick king and save the kingdom. More realistically, it is a story about finding meaning and setting one's course in the very specific ways that will influence the entire rest of one's life. As we've already explored in our initial post about the hero arc, it is a story about exploring one's newly burgeoning power as an adult and discovering whether or not that power will be surrendered into a greater love, which could be for a specific person or cause, but generally is seen to represent a loving reintegration with society itself. As such, the hero arc is certainly a story with a deep inner conflict and character arc for the protagonist. The antagonists the character faces in the external plot may demand all sorts of heroic action. But fundamentally, as always, they represent key aspects of the hero himself. The two-sided face of the hero's archetypal antagonist can be seen to be represented by the dragon and the sick king. As always, one or the other can be more prevalent in the outer conflict, depending on the nature and focus of the specific story. Either way, both are important symbolic forces within this exciting story. Although the distinction may not always be cut and dried, we can recognize that a practical antagonist is one that faces the hero in the external plot, while a thematic antagonist is one that represents the character's inner struggle. Often there is much crossover within the actual portrayal within a story, since of course we want plot and theme to be as unified as possible. But when viewed symbolically through the terms dragon and sick king, we can get a better glimpse of the true essence and purpose of these driving forces in a hero's story. The symbolism of the hero slaying the dragon is one of the oldest in human memory. We recognize this representation of the dragon as that of a monster, a relatively undifferentiated evil, but one that is animalistic rather than abstract. And in light of the fact that this quote-unquote evil grows more and more abstract as the life arcs progress, it is perhaps interesting to just consider that the dragon appears as such a practical foe in the hero arc, in part because youthful protagonists tend to view good and evil in very simple and practical terms, as another living entity that simply needs to be vanquished. Other than being powerful, ravenous, and indiscriminately murderous, dragons are usually portrayed as greedy hoarders. By the time the call to adventure reaches the unlikely hero, it is clear the dragon's threat to the kingdom is less about whatever damage he is wreaking through his fire breathing, and more specifically through something crucial that he has stolen and or hoarded. This special object, famously referred to by Joseph Campbell as the elixir, could be a magical object, or it could be a person, such as the princess whom the hero is so often charged with saving. Whatever it is more than just a thing. It is symbolic of the kingdom's well-being. Without this thing or person, the kingdom will suffer and decay. And so the dragon represents a force in the hero's world that is blocking health and growth. Crucially, the dragon is blocking not just the hero, but others as well. The hero arc is founded upon the hero learning to care for and protect others, in essence, to become a stand-up member of society. As such, it is important that even in a relatively mundane story, the threat will be to more than just himself, even if it should seem that narrow in the beginning. Indeed, by the end, the hero will at least become willing to sacrifice his own well-being for the good of all. Depending on the scope of your story, the dragon may indeed be a dragon or some other mythic foe, but his essence can also be represented in other character archetypes, ranging from a sorcerer on down to those characters who are more properly the hero's equal, such as the bully. What is important is that the dragon represents a threat to the hero's safe little village world. It is a threat that initially seems far beyond his capability to deal with. But it is in the rising up that he reaches his heroic potential and grows into the caring responsibility and leadership of a mature adult. Almost as ancient, although perhaps less well known than the dragon, is the sick king. Very often in the old tales, the hero arc is precipitated by the illness of the realm's king. The magical object held by the dragon is symbolically the healing elixir needed to heal the king. It is understood that the sick king is representative of a sick kingdom, that indeed the kingdom's current woes are because of the king's sickness. And although this sickness may be a literal physical malady, it too is symbolic of a failure of leadership or even egregious corruption on the king's part. He is no longer a true and healthy king, as we see in the king arc, but more properly puppet tyrant, or even hermit witch, or miser sorcerer. The sick king represents a failure in the cycle of the life arcs. Growth has stagnated, and it falls upon the youthful life force energy of a newly appointed hero to try to set right the balance, with perhaps some help from a canny elder or mentor. It is the hero's purity and potential that allow him the opportunity to restore youth and vitality to the king and the kingdom. Although not healed as part of a hero arc, an excellent example of the sick king can be found in The Two Towers, in which Theoden, king of Rohan, has lost all strength, vitality, and even reason due to the corrupting whispers of Wormtongue in his ear. The kingdom suffers direly, on the brink of falling to the great evil of Sauron, even as Theoden's son and heir dies and his beloved niece and nephew are degraded before him. In the face of this grotesque corruption of responsible and loving leadership, the only hope is that either a rising queen shall dethrone the sick king, or a hero shall redeem him. In some stories, the sick king may only be a background motivation for the hero's quest against the dragon. The archetype of the sick king may be mostly present within the story simply as evidenced in the sickness of the kingdom through which the hero travels. But the sick king may also be more of a direct antagonist. If the sick king's illness is less debilitating than corrupting, he may be represented as a powerful figure who is directly blighting the kingdom, either personally or vicariously through a weaponized dragon, symbolic or otherwise. It's also possible, and more mythically accurate, that the sick king and the dragon should both be actively destructive elements within the story, but ones who also directly oppose each other. In this case, the hero must defeat them both in order to redeem the kingdom. The hero arc, like all the masculine arcs, lends itself most obviously to plot-driven stories in which the primary antagonists are those faced in the external conflict. It is indeed possible that the conflict should be entirely focused on external antagonists, which can still be deeply symbolic in their own right. But because this is specifically a hero arc, the changes should be influencing the protagonist's personal growth as well. Both the dragon and the sick king will be active in the external plot. Often, the sick king will be a presence lurking behind the hero, pursuing him on his quest, while the dragon is a presence ahead of the hero, creating obstacles. And this can present a wonderfully layered set of conflicts, as well as many opportunities for raising the stakes. But it is to be recognized that the dragon and the sick king are also both internal forces with which the hero starts out unwittingly identifying. Just as Luke Skywalker in The Empire Strikes Back cut down his vision of the sick king Darth Vader, only to find his own face staring out of the broken mask, the sick king represents the decay of the heroic principle. The hero's central struggle is between power and love, control and surrender, and so his relationship to the sick king can be used to represent his own natural affinity and temptation toward corrupted power. And this struggle, of course, can end with a powerful declaration, such as Luke's to Emperor Palpatine in Return of the Jedi, when he later refuses to kill Vader, whom he now knows to be his own father. And the same holds true in regard to the dragon. Symbolically, it is understood that the ancient dragon was often simply another guise of the princess that the hero was trying to recognize. As such, the dragon is in fact representative of the corrupted capacity for love in the hero himself. His journey is that of overcoming his own selfishness and desire for power and control so that he may love fully and compassionately. Only once he has slain his own inner dragon is he worthy to love and save the princess, and thereby heal the kingdom. In their book, Romancing the Shadow, Connie Zweig and Steve Wolf note this by saying, "In countless tales, a young male full of bravado makes a perilous journey, which typically includes a descent to darkness, and slays a terrible shadow monster, winning a damsel as his prize. Interpreted psychologically, the hero slays the monster other within. The ego vanquishes the shadow, but does not stop to recognize it as a dark brother, so the deeper initiation does not take place." But, of course, these deeper initiations are still available to the character in later arcs. In most hero arc stories, the dragon will be the final climactic antagonist the hero faces. From there, he will return with the elixir to heal the sick king in the resolution. But these trappings are, of course, deeply symbolic and can be maneuvered into many different practical aspects in different types of stories. Foundationally, the hero arc is a wonderfully simple story about the struggle between love and power. As such, the conflict between protagonist and antagonist is usually relatively simple as well. Stereotypically, we see it in the old trope about how all the hero has to do is kill the bad guy, save the girl, and ride off into the sunset. There's a deep resonance and beauty to this, but it's important to recognize and remember that this simplistic view of good and evil, and life itself, is still a relatively youthful perspective. It is one that belongs specifically to the hero stage of life, but one that should hopefully be moved past as the character continues to evolve into the capacity to see life's conflict in broader terms and to adapt accordingly in later arcs. So stay tuned. Next week, we will discuss the Queen's archetypal antagonists of Invader and Empty Throne. And in the meantime, I hope you'll stop by the site and tell me your opinions. Can you think of any examples of the dragon and sick king in fiction? If you'd like to be part of the word player community over on my site and join in the conversation on this subject, be sure to stop by the website at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. You can always find a transcript of the most recent podcast and add your voice to the discussion by visiting the first post on the site's homepage. And don't forget that if you're looking for an older post, you can always find those by putting the podcast title in the search field at the top of the right-hand column. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and Amazon Music, or whatever your favorite podcast platform may be. And if you'd like to do something to support helping writers become authors, it always means a ton if you're able to leave just a quick rating or review on your site of choice. Also, many thanks to those who support my work on Patreon. Your patronage helps make helping writers become authors, and its many resources available to writers everywhere. If you're interested in becoming a patron, you can find out more at patreon.com/kmweiland. Thank you so much for listening to the Helping Writers Become Authors podcast, and be sure to check back again next week.